Go ahead and speak.
Okay. I want I want to talk. Um let's start the intro over cuz this is very fascinating to me. I don't know anything about politics despite what it is that I think that I know, what it is that I say that I know. I don't know shit. Fuck. Okay, so I don't know anything about politics, obviously. Look at me. And the language around what is your ideology is like confusing to me because I find when someone calls me a conservative, I laugh hard. I have been called a conservative on Reddit before, which look at me. I don't think that I relate to the concept as I understand it of conservatism or conservatism. How do you say that? I always thought it was conservativism, not conservatism. It's hard. Okay. Did I lose you? Sorry for the knock. And let me tell you, I got about 20 minutes into this. There's no way that was 20 minutes, was it? Wow. Okay, so I definitely watched 20 minutes of this. Taking the information in, Wendigoon does a great introduction. He explains, I guess, the graph, the hierarchy, where on the quadrants each political word and concept falls under. This video is from 2 years ago. I haven't seen it, except for the first 20 minutes. And something that I found while listening to Wendigoon talk about what are the political ideologies and where do they fall, what are the beliefs, condensed but understandable, of these different political ideologies. He described fiscal conservatism as people being entitled to keep the money that they earn. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I agree with that. Something something socialism. Like, oh, something something communism. Sorry, they're different, which we'll probably find out about in this video. All I know is that socialism and communism are like same but different. Anyway, fiscal conservatism could fall under the category of a socialist point of view or a communist point of view, just in that the money that, I guess it's socialism and communism, but communism is more specifically about like the money that you make and how it relates to your status in the world, poverty related stuff. Yeah, fiscal conservatism sounds to me like aspects of socialism and communism, just in that what you, the work that you do and the money that you get paid should be yours. You should get paid your worth in relation to the work that you do and the time you spend working. That's your money, that's your labor, that's your time, right? Like, how much is your time worth? Fiscal conservatism, in the brief description that Wendigoon gave, made me think, yeah, people deserve to make and keep their money. And that was what kind of like led me to this whole, oh, maybe it would be fun to talk about this out loud while I'm drawing, because I gotta get some art done, which you're not going to be able to see because this is not a camera to watch art from. It's a camera to be voyeuristic from. Hello. Let's start from the very beginning.
Hello everybody, today we are going to be looking over every single political ideology, and yes, I mean all of them. And the way we are going to do that is with a little thing called the political compass. I'm going to go ahead and explain how that political compass works. However, if you're already familiar with it, just letting you know now that there's timestamps to each quadrant of the compass in the description. Also, do you all like that I have a new board and an actual light source now? We're really moving up in the world. The political compass is a roadmap that is used to determine how one ideology relates to another. And it basically works like this. The higher up on the compass the ideology is, the more authoritarian or pro-government it is. And the lower something is on the compass, the more libertarian or anti-government it is. So if whatever ideology you're looking at is somewhere north of this axis, it's most likely in favor of large government. Whereas if what you're looking at is south of the axis, it's probably more freedom or individual oriented.
Okay, freedom or individual oriented or government oriented. Because I feel like each individual person would have a differing political view depending on their lot in life, right? Like if you have a lot of money and you hoard a lot of money, I'm like looking into the mic like there's a camera there. If you have a lot of money and you hoard that money, obviously you want to keep that money, whatever number it is, you want to see that number be as high as possible. We love our numbers. I like seeing a bigger paycheck than I like being disappointed in a smaller one, right? Yeah, it just tickles my brain. It's the same as like if you hoard cash in places, you hold it in your hands and it tickles your brain because you're like, nom, 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 nom. Value, value, value. Your value, physical, in a physicality. The physicalization of your worth in your hands, or what you think, or what you've been told your worth is in your hands. Many money. Yeah, I wonder what parts of my life I feel that government is absolutely necessary. Like I think I view housing, I guess like human rights, as something the government should be in charge of, in reaction to society's expectations for what they deem as theirs. Like people make up the laws, so the laws maintain society, people make up society, etc. It's like a relationship. Yeah, I think I would be more authoritarian in some ways, and more socialist in others, and more libertarian. Oh, there we go. That was a good one. More libertarian in some ways. I don't usually do this. There you go. Hi. Now I need someone to do that to my neck. Nicely. Yeah. What's the other? His head's in the way. What's the other? I'm in the way of his head. What's the last one? He'll talk about it.
And then your left to right, or x-axis, determines how that ideology handles money and social issues. For example, if your ideology is on the left side of the compass, it probably has ideas that are more socially centered. Or in other words, more ideas that money should be redistributed to people and that people should overall be more accepting of others. Whereas if your ideology is on the right side of compass, they probably value privacy more and the idea that someone maintains their own wealth. Now, I'm being very general right now, and as we start going through specific
someone should maintain their own wealth, but the people who do the work and earn the money should be the ones keeping the money. Okay, I'm curious.
Ideologies, you'll probably see it better in practice. However, as you can already see, this is where ideas like right wing or left wing come from. So just for an example, say that whatever ideology we're talking about is very anti-government and thinks that people should share their money. They are going to be down in this quadrant somewhere. Now let's say your ideology is very pro-government and thinks that someone should keep whatever money they make. That ideology is going to be somewhere up here.
That's
so while
me.
not perfect, this is a good way of determining how certain ideas or philosophies compare to each other. Now, as people who are familiar with it know, the compass does have some downsides, and it's not a perfect way of determining what someone believes. For example, one of the things that we're going to see as we get into the compass is ideas around ethnicity. Like, for
the
example, if
second
someone
quadrant.
believes that their ethnicity is the best and others shouldn't interact with them, that's going to show up more on the right. And that's
Oh,
simply
no.
because ideas on the right are more about being exclusionary or maintaining your own privacy as you see it, whereas
Oh fuck, am I racist? No, we'll figure it out.
the left is more about living together and community-centered
Yeah.
ideas. That doesn't mean someone on the right is racist. That doesn't mean someone on the left isn't racist. That's just the trend that you see. But for example, let's say that we take someone and their only two ideas is that they're very, very racist and they think everyone should share their money. Well, that is a very right-wing ideology combined with a very left-wing ideology. So on the compass, they're going to end up somewhere around here. Now, let's say alternatively, you have someone else who thinks all races should get along and isn't racist at all, but thinks that everyone should keep their own money and give none of it away. Well, that is, again, a very left-wing ideology combined with a very right-wing ideology, so that idea is
okay,
also
we're
going to end up
fine.
here. Even though these two people disagree on literally everything,
Okay, so I'm not racist. Don't worry.
they show up on the same spot on the compass, and that's why this isn't a perfect way of determining what someone believes. That's where jokes come in, like if you have someone who doesn't believe in anything, they technically wind up on the center. But if you also have someone who believes in everything very hard from all the corners at once, they would also wind up on the center. So just because two ideologies are laying next to each other whenever we go through them, that doesn't mean they're close in belief. That just means the rule of averages kind of ended up putting them next to each other.
That's actually really cool. Also, this is a really interesting way to visualize political alignment. Play.
Other. And also, I want to say this now, we're literally going to go over 100 ideologies from history. These are a vast array of ideas and concepts that have been tried or theorized. So don't apply modern politics to what I'm going to talk about, because it's not going to work. Like, to put it into perspective, the entirety of modern US politics takes place in about that circle. Now, that doesn't mean people who are parts of US politics or US government can't be from other places on the compass, but the actual policies and sort of practices in the US are just that little circle.
Okay. Interesting. I wonder where Canada would fall on this then. Where is Canada on the political alignment chart? Align. Oh my gosh. Like Canadian policies as a whole. Not the parties, but like Canadian policies. Bing is like, looks like I can't respond to this topic. Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. No, you're giving me the same thing. Laser Yeah, I would like to know what Canada's political alignment is as a country. Ha 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 ha. That's what I don't want to see. I want to see the government. That's what we want to see. Government.
This is much, much bigger than modern buzzwords or media stories. Also, I'm going to number these quadrants as 1, 2, 3, 4 because that's just the way it works in math. So as we go through this, don't try to apply modern buzzwords or politics to these ideas or places on the compass because it's not really going to work. For example, if you come in saying that gun control is a left-wing thing, well, I've got news for you. Gun control is an entire top of the compass thing because historically and in practice, the only people that have believed that guns should be taken away is people who think that they should be in charge of what happens. And then people further down on the compass who advocate for it normally do it as a sort of social policy. However, the only ones that maintain it throughout history are those who want power. Or take an issue like abortion, and you may say that's a left-wing thing. Well, again, it's an entire bottom of the compass thing. The reason being people at the bottom of the compass who don't like government control think that people should be entitled to their own actions and their own agency and therefore should be allowed to get an abortion. And in the opposite direction as gun control, if people further up on the compass are convinced to not do it, it's normally from an ethics standpoint. So as we talk about politics and different forms of government, and I use a lot of words like conservative and liberal, you've got to separate that from preconceived notions in today's media because I guarantee you those words do not mean what the modern news and formats say that they mean. We are going to go through this image here, which was sent in to me by a fan. I have lost the email and cannot find who did it, but if you're watching this, please leave a comment below because I appreciate the idea. As you can see, there's some ideologies that are off of the compass, and that's because they're so wacky or over the top that they don't really fit on the compass and kind of work as a parody of the quadrant itself. And because of the whole right-wing, left-wing, authoritarian, libertarian thing, the quadrants can be described as authoritarian right, authoritarian left, libertarian left, and libertarian right. We are going to go through these in the numbers I mentioned earlier, again, just because that's how it works in math. And hopefully you enjoy it as we go through the whole of human ideology and politics to talk about all ideas as they range from authoritarian to libertarian, from socialist to capitalist. And speaking of capitalists, have you ever thought making your own content or editing videos, but you're not exactly sure what editor to use? Well, let me introduce you to today's sponsor, Wondershare Filmora. Wondershare Filmora is great if you're just starting out or a seasoned creator, as it has a ton of features like special effects or overlay filters, and even royalty-free music, which, let me tell you, on YouTube is a really big deal. And with their newest 10.5 version, there's a ton of cool features like an auto reframe, and even this add-on you can get called AI Portrait that blurs the background and makes you look like you're in your own sort of zone. Like, check this out, just drag a couple clips together. From there you can cut, edit, move, or whatever you need to do. And from there you can add your effects, put on special text, and in no time you can have your videos looking far more professional than mine. Which isn't saying much, but still. So if you're looking into content creation, I highly suggest you go to the link in the description and download Wondershare Filmora 10. And it's completely free to use, although the free version will include a Filmora watermark. However, for those of you that may want to go premium and get videos without the watermark, Filmora is currently hosting a giveaway where if you either comment what you think of the newest version of Filmora, or if you make your own video with Filmora and then @ me on Twitter with the hashtag #CreateWithFilmora, Filmora will pick a random winner to get a year of premium for free. So once again, if you're looking to get into video editing or just try a new editor, check out the link in the description. I hope that you enjoy. Thank you so much to Filmora for sponsoring the video. It really does mean a lot. And thank you to everyone for watching this. And right now we are just a few feet over there. We are back to the video right now. Had to adjust the camera a bit, but as you can see, I'm wearing the new merchandise, the A Deeper Dive shirt. which I'm very thankful to Kiana Bebop, who I will tag in the description when I talk about the shirts, a Twitter artist who did the design for me. It means a lot. As you can see, it's based on the Deeper Dive or conspiracy episodes, and on the back, it says, "Ask me about giants," because if there's one thing I love on this channel, it's giants. So link to that will be in the description. Thank you all so much for the support you've shown me. It really does mean a lot.
Yeah, but what about everyone
I'm at like
else?
550,000 subs now. And it's still wild that this little hobby of mine turned into what it is, and all of you great people. And I'm really blessed and just thankful for the opportunity. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. I hope you enjoy, but above all else, and I mean it, thank you for watching. So we are beginning with the top right corner, also known as authoritarian right. I also want to emphasize that I am not a technical historian or political expert, although I pretend to be one on the internet. So I guarantee you that you probably know more than I do. I'm just doing this for fun, so please be easy on me. I promise I'm trying my best. We're going to start as close to the center as possible with these ideologies and then get to the weirder and wacky ones as we move on. So first up, we have third way. Third way is pretty much as close to the dead center as you can get. It's the idea that we can have stuff like right-wing capitalism where people can keep their money, and then left-wing social policies like social programs and things like that. The true concept of third way was something that came around while Bill Clinton was in presidency, and it's pretty much just a central balance of all of it. Just to the right of that, we have...
Okay, so something that I didn't know, because I was like, oh, I thought he was going 1, 2, 3, 4, and when I had watched this earlier, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why are you starting from the far bottom left? Isn't that libertarian left or whatever? But now I realize what he said is what he's doing, and he's starting from the center of quadrant 1. I get it now. I get it. I'm all caught up.
Have national liberalism. Now, as I mentioned earlier, right side of the compass, and the closer you get to the right side, is the more that you focus on either yourself or your own country. National liberalism is pretty much third way, only those healthcare policies and things apply to your own nation. In other words, you're not doing aid programs for other people, just your own. So while still moderate, it's slightly right of third way because it's slightly more self-focused. Just above that is senatorialism. This is pretty much the idea that a country should be run by a senate or a small group of elected people. As you move further down the compass, there's sort of this dissolving of power, and as you move up, there's more of a focus of power. So the very top is one person or one very small group of people should run everything, and at the bottom is a very large or no one should run everything. So the reason senatorialism is a little bit up is because it's a relatively small group of people. However, it's not crazy or anything because these people are either chosen or there's enough of them that they can be trusted. Pretty similar to the idea of how Rome's government worked. And to the right of that is constitutional monarchism. This is the idea that you can have something like a king or a queen, but they're bound to a very specific set of rules. The easiest way to define it is that the king or queen does not rule over their people, they simply reign over their people. What that means is there is a very limited amount of things that they can do, and it serves as more of a presidency or elected office. However, because it's a monarch and kind of gives idea to the whole birthright idea of a leadership, it's still a relatively right-wing ideology. Because as we get more to the right, we're going to see more value given to worth at birth. And just to the right of that, we have liberalism. This is where that thing I said earlier about don't try to assign modern buzzwords to this compass apply. Because in most modern contexts, liberalism is defined as like a leftist ideology, when in actuality, it's comparatively right. The core tenet of liberalism is essentially government-protected individuality. Or in other words, everyone has equality, and the government's purpose is to make sure that people maintain their own agency. Or in other words, police should protect you from people that do crimes, everyone's allowed to vote, etc. Again, that doesn't mean other places on the compass or even in other quadrants don't also feel that way. That's just the main ideas of liberalism, and the reason it's sort of a right policy is because it believes in hardcore individuality. And you know, the state's supposed to protect it, so that's what puts it up here in the authoritarian right. Jumping back over...
I guess I'm a liberal. Okay, we can write that down as a characteristic. A general liberal where wait, I heard what he said, but I didn't put it in my brain.
In other words, police should protect you from people that do right-wing ideology. Because as we get more to the right, we're going to see more value given to worth at birth. And just to the right of that, we have liberalism. This is where that
Worth at birth. Hold on.
and kind of gives idea to the king or queen does not rule over their people, they simply reign over their people. What that means is there is a very limited amount of things that they can do, and it serves as more of a presidency or elected office. However, because it's a monarch and kind of gives idea to the whole birthright idea of a leadership, it's still a relatively right-wing ideology. Because as we get more to the right, we're going to see more value given to worth at birth. And just to the right of that, we have liberalism. This is where that thing I said earlier about don't try to assign modern buzzwords to this compass apply. Because in most modern contexts, liberalism is defined as like a leftist ideology, when in actuality it's comparatively right. The core tenet of liberalism is essentially government-protected individuality, or in other words, everyone has equality, and the government's purpose is to make sure that people maintain their own agency.
Yeah,
Or in
like
other words,
security of
police should
person.
protect-
Security of person. Your right to housing.
is to make sure that people, in other words, everyone has equality, and the government's purpose is to make sure that people maintain their own agency. Or another.
Okay, so the government is supposed to regulate, the government is literally supposed to be regulating so that people can maintain their own life. Okay. Okay. Make that make sense. My brain says government's role, poverty legislation.
The government's purpose is to make sure that people maintain their own agency. Or in other words,
Okay.
police should protect you from people that do crimes, everyone's allowed to vote, etc. Again, that doesn't mean other places on the compass or even in other quadrants don't also feel that way. That's just the main ideas of liberalism, and the reason it's sort of a right policy is because it believes in hardcore individuality. And you know, the state's supposed to protect it, so that's what puts it up here in the authoritarian right. Jumping back over here, we have progressive conservatism. The core idea of progressive conservatism was mostly put together as a response to slavery in the 1800s. The idea is you still have a conservative government that holds on to pre-existing values. However, there is forceful progress in certain directions. Basically, as it was done with slavery, is the government comes in and forces people to quit doing that. And because there is an element of government force, that's what pushes it further.
Do you mind chilling out with the slavery, please? No. I want to do slavery. Imagine being mad. Huh.
Further up on the compass. However, since it's progressive, it's naturally more left than normal conservatism, which we'll get to in a second. And just right over that, we have eco-conservatism. Eco-conservatism, also known as green conservatism, is again a government that protects what is already there, but directly applied to nature. So this is where things like Teddy Roosevelt and the Federal Parks Program comes into play. And in practice, it means a semi-strong government as a means of protecting those ecological areas. Now, you may be confused thinking that eco stuff or stuff to do with nature is more of a left-wing idea, and as we're going to see later, it's also a left-wing idea, but because the upper right is so concerned with preserving what already exists and keeping things sacred, preserving nature also applies to them as well. And because you need, again, a semi-strong government to actually mandate this, that's what pushes it up. And just above those is Kuomintangism. Probably not pronouncing that right. This is essentially a party within Taiwan that believes Taiwan should be combined with China. And while on an economic or social axis, they're pretty center. The fact that they want to join to a very powerful centralized government makes the ideology pretty close to authoritarian, but not quite. And then just to the right of that, we have confederalism. You may be familiar with the word Confederate because of the Confederate Army during the American Civil War. However, you may not know what the term actually means. Confederalism, or a confederacy, is basically the idea that these small states or sectioned off groups of people are much, much stronger than the actual government that connects them all. Contrast that with something like how the United States works, where the state cannot overrule what the federal government says. Confederacy is basically the other way around. Now, as we're going to see in a bit, this can go either way. It can either mean you have a very strong state that enforces people what to do, or as we'll see later, it can mean you have states that allow much more freedom than the federal government could. But because it allows for more power to potentially take place, and also in a lot of practice confederacy, states have very strong borders, or in other words, a very militarized government. That's what pushes it near the top over here. Just to the right of that is elective monarchism. This is a monarchy, or in other words, a king and queen. However, they are elected in most often cases by a small group of people. The reason this is higher and more to the right than a constitutional monarchy is because, again, normally a small group of people elect whoever the king or queen is, and most often they have more power than in a constitutional monarchy. An example of this that a lot of people don't really think about is Vatican City, because technically the Pope is elected by a small group of the cardinals. And the reason it's sort of dead center of the authoritarian right is because it can go either way depending on if the king or queen is good or bad, or at least very overwhelming or very liberating of their people. And then jumping back down here, we have conservatism. The basic tenet of conservatism is to conserve what already exists. So things like religious rights and property ownership are important to an average conservative, and therefore a government is needed to protect those certain rights. This is something that we're going to see a lot more of whenever we get to the...
Okay, but preserving what already exists. Okay, follow me. Preserving what already exists, how far back does that go? Does that go back till just the creation of colonial law and colonial social regulation? Or does that conservatism reach back to the conservation of the world before colonialism? Like, what makes a person wanting to conserve? What makes a person conservative? Okay. It's not good or bad. It is just the fact of the label. It's just a fact of the label. There's not a character or ethic or moral attributed to these concepts unless the beliefs are used to undermine the lives of other people. You can believe what you want, but when your belief begins to impede on the well-being of others around you, it is ethically, in practice, not a good belief.
Libertarian right later in the video, but the right side has a lot of focus on individuality and personal ownership, whereas more left-leaning ideas, even as you can see here in the difference between liberalism and conservatism, revolve around the idea of sharing the wealth and providing for your own people. This is also what I meant earlier whenever I circled this general area and said the majority of American politics occur here. This is what I'm talking about. Liberal conservatism, which is right above conservatism, isn't necessarily a combination between the two, but more of its own thing. Liberal conservatism is those conservative tenets that I talked about earlier. However, there is more of a push towards law and order and forced good. In other words, the basic idea that people should not only be corrected in a physical law sense, but also in a morality sense. In other words, things that go against core conservative tenets or practices should at least be frowned upon. Or in other words, it's liberally using your conservatism. I hope that wasn't too confusing.
No, I got that. I got it. But let's go over it again.
What what already exists. So things like religious rights and property ownership are important to an average conservative, and therefore a government is needed to protect those certain rights. This is something that we're going to see a lot more of whenever we get to the libertarian right later in the video. But the right side has a lot of focus on individuality and personal ownership, whereas more left-leaning ideas, even as you can see here in the difference between liberalism and conservatism, revolve around the idea of sharing the wealth and providing for your own people. This is also what I meant earlier whenever I circled this general area and said the majority of American politics occur here. This is what I'm talking about. Liberal conservatism, which is right above conservatism, isn't necessarily a combination between the two, but more of its own thing. Liberal conservatism is those conservative tenets that I talked about earlier. However, there is more of a push towards law and order and forced good. In other words, the basic idea that people should not only be corrected in a physical law sense, but also in a morality sense. In other words, things that go against core conservative tenets or practices should at least be frowned upon. Or in other words, it's liberally using your conservatism. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I promise I'm trying my best. Basically, the government can be used to sort of guide people down certain ideologies, which is why it's more north than basic liberalism or conservatism. And then just above that, we have national conservatism. This is basically the idea of preserving one's own value, but specifically applied to your country. In other words, a taught and felt sense of importance when it comes to world issues, and an overall sense of national pride. Because that naturally involves the use of more government, or at least a sense of betterment when it comes to government, that's what pushes it up. Even though economy can vary, it's normally along the lines of what we do is right because we're right. I also need to get this out of the way now. If I make jokes about something as we go through this, it's not me showing favoritism or disdain for a certain ideology. It's just because I like to make jokes, and I'm going to do it whenever I can. And then right beneath that, next to liberal conservatism, we have Zionism. Zionism is specifically applied to the Jewish people who believe that they are entitled to the nation of Israel. And while not really that authoritarian, it is pretty right-wing because it falls back into that whole sense of national identity and born purpose at birth. And then all the way with our first one on the right wall of the compass is fiscal conservatism. Fiscal conservatism is conservatism, the idea that you should preserve what you have, applied specifically to money. And since the closer you get to the right, the more the ideology likes to keep their money, and the idea of fiscal conservatism being that the government exists to protect your own money, you get the point. While not overly authoritarian, it's the idea that when it comes to money, you should be able to keep whatever you make, and the government should exist to protect that wealth. And then right above that one, we have neoconservatism. This is a new idea, that really spawned in the United States around the time of Vietnam. And it's essentially the idea that we should share these conservative principles of what matters to us with everyone else. Or in other words, it's the concept of interventionism. The idea that we have these beliefs and policies that work for us, therefore we should share, or in some cases force that with other people. And again, since the right also is the idea of our way of life is important, the idea of rapidly enforcing your way of life on other people is very, very right-wing. And then right above that is traditional conservatism. I promise I'm going to stop saying the word conservatism here in a second. So like with all the other ones, how they're all different routes that conservatism can take, this one's specifically about morality. Or in other words, the preserved or kept ideas of what is good and what is wrong should be enforced on other people. That's the reason that this one's even further up on the authoritarian axis. Because while a lot can keep in mind the idea of the state mandating stuff like money, the idea of them mandating things like morality is a lot more on the pro-government side. Ideas like this are seen with a lot of religious organizations, and the idea that because we do things a certain way, you should also do things that certain way. Even though the two are pretty close together, paleoconservatism is almost the opposite of neoconservatism. Whereas neo believes we should share our doctrines with the rest of the world, paleoconservatism is the idea that we should be kept to ourselves and not interact with the outside world as much as possible.
I am on that side. I think extreme globalization was a mistake, but not for racism reasons, for like the unregulation of the important aspects of globalization, right? Like, decisions were either made that weren't beneficial to the globe, human beings, of the world. Globalization was more done to, like, profit a few companies, not benefit the people. And it's the lack of, like, effective global decisions being made with each other that makes me think that that whole outreach thing might have been a little bit too quick, maybe. I think it's good that we get to travel freely, if we get to travel freely. If you live in a country that allows you to go from one place to another with safety and with freedom, if you're from a fucking white country, being able to go across the world is a gift. It's an exciting experience, and it's something everybody deserves. Meeting new people is fascinating. Our, like, sharing of culture and experiences is a good part of globalization. It's that the people we have been fucked by corporations. God. I believe I fall under paleoconservatism when it comes to human rights issues, to an extent. Like, we shouldn't be violent. We shouldn't be allowing violence from our side to go into other spaces. This is lots to think about. Ooh. He's got, like, a little cat mouth. So cute.
Or at least in the sense of policy and military. Also, core tenets with paleoconservatism is the idea, or at least as it's applied to the United States nowadays, that we have gone too far, or at least the military has gone too far. And while you may think, oh, not putting your military into other nations, that sounds like a very far removed policy from all these others, but you have to realize that also applies to international aid. So if another country...
So you can be paleoconservative with the use of military, but you don't have to be paleoconservative with aid. You can have a different perspective on different categories of the politic. What makes up every aspect of the world that makes up your citizenry. You can have different views on them.
Country needs help. The paleoconservative idea is don't give it to them, because
Do
we
give
don't
it to
want to talk to them as much as possible. And then to the right of that, we have Pinochetism. This is named after the General Pinochet of Chile, or Chile, whatever. So it's pretty much a doctrine based around his practices. And for those that don't know, Pinochet was famous for taking socialists within Chile, taking them up in the air in a helicopter, and then throwing them out. So it's not only conservative ideas of we have to make...
Why? Fucking why? What exactly was the problem with socialism to the extent that it was okay to throw people who are like, here's an ideology I support, from a fucking plane? I cannot understand. Okay.
Maintain what's important to us. It's the idea of actively and very quickly removing those who do not agree with you. So yeah, you can't get much more maintaining your values than immediately killing anyone that doesn't maintain those values. Moving back over here more towards the left and a little bit up, we have Christian theocracy. This is the idea that there should be a government of some sort that's sole purpose is to maintain Christian values. So while...
Okay. Go ahead. Go make a society where you uphold Christian values. Just go. Pick a plot of land, make it a country for you, and believe and act how you want to act in line with your Christian governance. Totally cool. But remember, when you're in our country, you follow our laws. Okay? It isn't, your laws aren't Christian. Your laws are human. Not everybody is Christian. Okay? Your right to be a person comes above your need to be Christian.
Like economically, because Christians believe in...
What is the economic beliefs? What would be the economic governance? How would you do that? What would be the economy of a Christian ran? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Exactly the same except for Christian. Don't just read the Bible, but read your constitutional rights. It's exactly the same.
And helping the poor and things like that, it's kind of diverse, or at least center when it comes to money. The reason it's so authoritarian is because it's a specific way of thinking, that way of thinking being Christianity, and the idea that the government needs to mandate it in some way. And to go ahead and speed this up a bit, Hindu theocracy, Buddhist theocracy, and Islamist theocracy are all the exact same thing, only applied to those respective religions.
Where is my satanic theocracy? Why is it that these are the only, I'm sure there are others, but the major religions that are we want a government based on our spirituality? How overbearing are these religions where they demand their own government? Where you control everybody who isn't Christian, or who isn't Buddhist, or who isn't Hindu, or who isn't an Islamist? It's just so weird. What are you gonna do? What would that even look like? I need an explanation. Literally, what would a Christian theocracy look like? Would you kill people who weren't Christian, or would you send them to jail? What are your laws based around a Christian fucking theocracy? Your constitutional rights are a Christian theocracy. They're not based on Christianity. They're based on basic human rights. But there's so many aspects of Christianity which, go into the creation of fair legislation. Christianity and any religion isn't about hate or fear. It's about love, compassion, equality, and support. That's religion, baby. Don't be weird.
So pretty much with all of these, Christian included, it's the idea of taking the values from that specific religion and having a state that's sole purpose is to enforce those ideas.
So it would just be a state of a bunch of Christians enforcing Christianity on each other? Is that what that means? I literally can't imagine your neighbors spying on each other, being like, is that Jesus enough? Would God approve? Weird.
So as you can imagine, pretty authoritarian, since it's a government whose sole purpose is to force religion on others. And then to the right of all of those, we have feudalism.
Why do you want that?
Most easily explained, feudalism is a land-based class structure. This is something that was commonly seen in medieval Europe, and is basically the idea that you have a lord who owns the land. You have the knights and sort of soldier class that work as his private guard, and then the peasants that just live on the land. This is a
Okay.
very clear hierarchy.
Okay, so that's how our rental system in Manitoba is. It's feudal. But that seems kind of crazy because do people really even own land? Do they, or does the government just rent it out to you? And if you abuse the land and the people who live on it, the government must have the right to take away that land because you are borrowing it from the Canadian government, right? Like, especially as punishment, like, what do you really own? What do you deserve to own if you infringe on other people's rights? I don't think much. I don't think anything at all. Karen, Living Recovery Foundation, Karen. Deal with yourself. Go deal with yourself. Okay? Karen? Please. You'll do the world a favor if you just go deal with yourself.
With a very clear power structure, and basically holds the idea that the amount of worth that someone has within an economy or social structure is solely defined by the amount of property that they own. And then just above feudalism, you have colonialism.
Wow.
Now, colonialism is often
Okay.
used as a sort of...
Okay, so Canada is feudalistic? Is that where we fall? Is Canada feudalistic? It feels like it. That feels like the crisis in Canada. Okay, interesting.
insult to groups of people who move to a new area and then begin to live there, and that's not what this is talking about. True colonialism is the idea that you can go to a new area, simply farm all of its resources, and collect the profit from it. Or in other words, this is like a cartoon level of capitalism, like Doof from the Lorax level of capitalism. Basically,
yeah, colonialism. Let's do it again.
the idea that new area and then begin to live there. Or sold the idea that the amount of worth that someone has within an economy or social structure is solely defined by the amount of property that they own. And then just above feudalism, you have colonialism. Now, colonialism is often used as a sort of insult to groups of people who move to a new area and then begin to live there, and that's not what this is talking about. True colonialism is the idea that you can go to a new area, simply farm all of its resources and collect the profit from it. Or in other words, this is like a cartoon level of capitalism, like Doof from the Lorax level of capitalism. Basically the idea that if you find a resource that you can use to make a profit, you are entitled to it. And therefore, in a government structure, you either are the reigning government or the reigning government protects those rights. And then
Finders keepers, okay. Stupid. With human lives?
just left of that, we have aristocracy. The main principle of an aristocracy is there are some people who are just better at ruling and making decisions than others. So therefore, a privileged few control what everyone else is allowed to do.
Okay, I actually don't disagree with some people making better decisions than others. That's why you have, like, experts. Okay? That's why you have people you refer to for advice on how to go one way or another. You, like, synthesize opinions to come up with the best decision for the greatest amount of people. Anyone can choose to pass a law. Literally anybody. Anybody could be in that seat That doesn't mean that anybody should be, just anybody should be in those seats, but anyone can sit down in those chairs. That doesn't mean you can do your job. Hi. Is it aristocratic? Ooh. Okay, hold on. Is it aristocratic? That's better like that. To believe, not that some people are inherently good decision makers, but that some people are inherently bad decision makers, especially when it comes to the concept of like law and society and the purpose of legislation, the purpose of governance. Like, some people just don't know what the point of governance is, or being governed. Like, why does the government exist? To protect you, to protect your rights as a human being. How does it do that? Does it do that for you? And why doesn't it?
A lot of older governments ruled like this, and the only thing that separates it from being at the very top is you technically have some dispersion of government, because instead of just having one king or queen who controls what everyone does all the time, it's a few people who control what everyone does all the time. So, you know, some level of balance, but it's essentially in line with the some people are just better than others argument. And now we're getting up there with the wacky ones, starting with neo-fascism.
Before we get into neo-fascism, cool. Some people are just better at stuff than others. That's a fact, though. That is a fact. That's a fact. Try to run. You try to run right now. Get out of here. Go run. Get out of here. It's impossible for you. I'm positive. Some people are just better at stuff than others. Taken out of context, that fact has been used to basically say that all black people are justifiably slaves. Like, isn't that what Aristotle said? Is that what that's based off of? Because I'm pretty sure Aristotle's argument was that some people are just born to be slaves. But, like, some people aren't born to be slaves. Nobody's born to be forced into slavery. Stupid. Some people are born to do labor, not to be slaves. Some people are born to build and create and do math and make art. Some people are born to make music. Some people are born to touch the souls of others. Some people are born to make good decisions in line with the human lifespan. Protection of the human life, protection of your security of person. Some people are just better at making those decisions than others. Like, that is a fact. Okay, into neo-fascism.
Neo-fascism, or basically new fascism, was created immediately after World War II. And it's basically the idea that core tenets of fascist governments should be preserved. We'll get into what those core tenets are here in a second, but the main ideas behind neo-fascism is that people have a certain worth depending on their ethnicity. National pride is very important and should be enforced and used. And ideas like a very strong military and an emphasized importance on preserved tradition. Over here on the left, we have something known as Vichy fascism. This is specifically in reference to certain French groups that allied themselves with Italy and Germany during World War II. So in other words, it's basically fascism, although instead of just national importance, there is some level of other country importance, or alliance at least, so it's not totally isolationist, but it's still fascism, which makes it still very super authoritarian. And then for our first one, at the roof of the political compass, we have fascism. Fascism is essentially a form of extreme nationalism. It's the idea that people native to a certain country are the most important within that country, and things like self-control and agency should be sacrificed for the greater good of one's own people. This is...
Okay. So, not like in a white supremacist way or anything, but don't we think that the way things went before colonization in Canada was better? Like, we talking the people native to the land? I would say, in that way, I'm a little fascist. Yeah, sure. Look at me. I'm anti-fascist, and also being alive is complex. I hate all these labels. I hate them, but they're really making me think thoughts. I'm thinking a lot of thoughts.
It's most often done through a very strong military that enforces either standards or moral practices. And the reason it's not super right-wing...
I think also, like, a lot of the logic behind, initial colonization was like, oh, we gotta get them before they get us. And then they figured out, look how easy it is for us to get them, God. Fucking lame. And that's why there's, like, the fight to stay fashy. It's like, now we look what we did to you. Now we gotta stranglehold our grip on society and how society is ran. Otherwise, you're gonna do to us what we did to you. Yeah. Ugh.
Even though it has ideas like intense nationalism within it, is because within fascism itself, there is a lot of sort of social programs for, of course, the people that fascism favors. So while there are several sort of socialist elements to the privileged class within a country, those don't apply to the people that it doesn't want it to apply to. Basically, it's the idea of standing up for your own people and helping yourself, and doing that by stepping on everyone else. And then just to the right of that, we have esoteric fascism. This is everything that I just said with more of a focus on the spiritual or supernatural, and a lot of the ideas within it justify the whole ethnic pride thing through a sense of spiritual superiority.
Oh.
Or in other words, we're not just better because we were born better, we're better because we've always been destined to be better.
Okay, so like the Christian theocracy thing.
And then to the right of that, we have the big spooky one, Nazism, which is in itself pretty much a form of fascism. The reason Nazism is to the right of fascism is because, as it's been historically proven, Nazism is much more active with its beliefs, whereas fascism, maybe we shouldn't encourage outsiders to come in or help people that aren't us. Nazism is actively removing those outside.
Okay, so you're talking about the amount of violence that's done against a group of people. Oh no. Okay, so fascism to Nazism. He said Nazism, and I hate that. Nazism. Being a motherfucking Nazi.
Which is not only super authoritarian, but more of a direct action approach when it comes to these ideas. The reason it's not...
That's really scary.
Not all the way on the right is because, similar to fascism that I mentioned earlier, there is a spreading of wealth within one's own country. Nazism itself is short for National Socialism. So while economically it's not over there, when it comes to things like social or order of importance, it's pretty much as far right as one can get. And then just to the right of that is neo-Nazism. I'll be honest, and this doesn't just apply to this one, but applies to a lot on the compass. I'm not entirely sure why the idea was placed where it's at. And I'm not an expert, so I'm not questioning it. I'm sure that this was done by someone far more educated than myself. But neo-Nazism in practice is pretty much just an attempt to bring back the core tenets of Nazism. So if I had to guess, the reason it's more right is because it's not only keeping up with the government that's currently in place, it's trying to institute a new government that has those beliefs. So you could kind of see that as more active. But yeah, in itself, the ideology is pretty much just trying to bring back the good old super racist, kill everyone ideas of Nazism. Coming off of the super hardcore dystopian governments a little bit, we have authoritarian capitalism. This is essentially the idea that power or control within a country should be based on who has the most money.
Yeah.
And the super powerful super government that would exist in this realm, which is controlled by those capitalists, enforce not only a protection of their own wealth, but the class structure of the beneficiary and the worker. While
Okay, so Canada is also an authoritarian capitalist society? Is that right? I want to eat. What time is it? It's been an hour. I'm going to eat. I'm going to take a break and eat. Bye.